welcome to this week's book club episode for Most Wanted by Rae Carson. We're looking at this book 2 chapters at a time, breaking down the themes and happenings to really enjoy it. We picked this book, or I picked this book because the Rise of Skywalker novelization is coming out, and if you're watching these videos as they come out, it comes out this week. So we won't have this book finished in time for the Rise of Skywalker, but that's okay. We'll only have about 4 weeks after this one before we'll have the book finished, so we're moving right along at a really good clip, which is really nice. But with that, let's go ahead and get in and discuss it. Today we're talking about chapters 13 and 14. So for the start of this video, as we talk about chapter 13, I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I want to read this paragraph from the start of chapter 13 because it's really beautiful. I typically don't like to read whole passages on these videos. One, because I'm really terrible at reading out loud, and I will mangle this and make it not near as beautiful as it is written. And also just because I like to use these videos, even though I'm summarizing what's going on, to help people who may not have read it in a while, or read it a couple of days before the video came out. I don't like these videos to serve in place of reading the novel itself. I hope to encourage people to buy the novel or get the novel from the library, borrow it from a friend, something like that, and read it themselves, and not to be able to use this instead of reading it. But I really wanted to share this paragraph. Qi'ra loved the freighter boneyard at night, the croaking bilge frogs, the creaking metal, the slap of wings on water, the pale moonlight against rusting hulks, the briny smell of fresh water meeting salt as the land sloped towards the ocean that she knew lay just over the horizon. More than anything, she loved the huge, ugly tree clinging stubbornly to her hill, the way its roots had a strangling grip on the skeleton of her freighter. That tree was a survivor. Her tree, her hill, her freighter's skeleton. This time they drove up to it in their stolen speeder, and she was glad to have company. To share this place with, well, she wasn't ready to say they were friends exactly, but Han and Solo, they were okay to have around in a pinch. I really, really liked that passage. I can never pronounce anything in Star Wars, but I just liked how it was crafted. You know, we're coming off of these high intensity scenes. Just prior to that, our heroes were running away from stormtroopers and thought they were dead, and then they weren't dead, and now they've met this engineer, and we've had these big action-packed moments and near-death experiences, and now we get this quiet moment of Qi'ra appreciating where she is in this place that she's kind of made her home. And I think it's important too, because the last time we were in her home, she was self-conscious about it. She was looking around at how Han and Solo might judge it, and now she's seeing it for the beauty that it is, and I think that is an important difference as well. And I just can't help but feel like that survivor tree, that tree that encompasses her home, is something that she sees herself in. That survivor tree is like her, and she is a survivor, and she has her roots in this place that she's at. She picked the silo because it's where she was from, and she didn't want to forget that. It's showing her transition into trusting Han and Solo, and not necessarily knowing how to feel about them, but feeling better about them than not. Then they all go inside of the freighter, and they kind of are licking their wounds isn't quite the right way to put it, but Solo is cold. The planet is too cold for him. They don't have enough heat. Han's face is burned from being inside the foundry. Qi'ra has bruises. They've all been worn down. They've all been beaten down. They've had all of these terrible things happen to them, and this is kind of like their moment to just breathe for a second. And I think it's good that they take this moment, because for me, I'd be like, I want to know what's in this message. I need to know right now. I need to know what's going on. I need to contact this person. I would have that anxiety of not wanting to take this moment, of seeing how things are going. But the fact that the three of them do, I think it's easy to forget when you're only reading this book 2 chapters a week, and you're not sitting down and plowing through it. But there's been so much going on. It's important that if you were binge reading this book instead of doing what we're doing, to have that moment to take a breath, because the book is about to go into its last stage and its last kind of plot point of what's going on, its last storyline, and you need that moment to kind of take in and reset. And before you can reset and go into the next storyline, you have to know where you are in this moment. So then they contact the engineer. The engineer is on the phone with them, the space phone. And the way the scene worked out was pretty amusing. Overall, the gist of it is, of course, they get a ride to go see her and give her the cube. if they get her contact out of some sort of Imperial containment, and they don't know the full ramifications of that yet. This scene, we see Qi'ra at her finest. We've seen Han fast talk his way out of situations the whole book, but now Qi'ra is the one who can handle this situation where she doesn't have to fast talk, but she does have to navigate a delicate situation, and she does it really well. We'd seen her kind of fumble with that at the beginning of the book, but that wasn't really her fault. It was kind of a meeting that was doomed to fail because of the Caldana and because of the information that Lady Proxima had. There was no way Qi'ra was ever going to handle that situation well, and she handled it about as well as anyone in her situation could. Here we have Qi'ra in a situation where she's the one who knows the information. She's not getting information from somebody else who doesn't have her best interests at heart. And we see her start to make this connection with the engineer, and now that I'm remembering where this book goes, we're going to have more to say on that here, and at least by next week, if not somewhere by the end of the book. I can't remember how far into it they do actually get to meet, but I'm excited to see how that goes. Now, she's not perfect. She doesn't handle it perfect. There's, one point where she's not really sure what to say, and Han steps in, and Han doesn't necessarily say the best thing, in the same way that Qi'ra is not necessarily saying the best thing when they fast talk, but they still get through it. And even then, Kira's upset's not the right word, but she's frustrated with what Han chooses to say, but is happy that Han at least is giving her that break. So we're seeing this back and forth of Han and Qi'ra trying to learn from each other and trying to help each other in these situations, but still ultimately leaning on, which one is better for that situation. We're really seeing them become a team. One line I think is funny is the engineer calls them scoundrels, and the book describes Qi'ra noticing Han being upset about it, but probably just feigning upsetness, but actually really liking the term. Again, this book is just littered with so many good references to Han Solo and the movies we know him from, and I appreciated that moment. When the conversation ends, Han expresses that he's really impressed with Qi'ra, and they have this goofy thing where Han's like, well, you're not really good at talking to people normally, but you're really good at a situation like that. And Kira's like, thanks for the compliment, I guess. And I just like the way that conversation goes. But Han is noticing, Qi'ra knows what to say. Qi'ra can see through, the engineer is almost kind of leading them in this conversation where she wants to see how much these kids know. Qi'ra is able to figure out, oh, you just don't want to use your resources too often, and making those connections, and that impresses Han. And I like that Han is kind of outright impressed versus Qi'ra, who's begrudgingly impressed, and that's kind of their nature as they get to know each other. But the thing that really throws both of them for the loop is Sulo calls them friends. So we started the chapter with Qi'ra I'm not sure if we're friends, and then Sulo's like, no, we're friends. They both wanted to tell Sulo that he didn't have to go with them on this dangerous mission, that it's not really his fault that he got caught up in all this, and that he can go, and Sulo's like, no, you're my friends, and I'm going to stick with you. And Sulo is just a good-hearted boy. I just love Sulo with my whole heart. He's so genuine, and he's one of those characters where you really wonder how he ended up in the situation. I mean, Han, Qi'ra, Sulo, they're all sympathetic. You're not Qi'ra deserves to be in the white worms, and you don't think Han deserves either. You can also see them finding their survival instincts, where it's what are Sulo's survival instincts? He's like, no, we're friends. It doesn't matter that we're also rivals. And it's just nice to have that kind of pure-hearted character, because it's this anchor that takes these two characters that we know Han is the good guy, and we want Qi'ra to remain being on the good side, even though we know that's not necessarily where she ends up. And it's nice to see this kind of goodness magnet that draws the best qualities out of these two characters that are in danger of becoming jaded. The end of the chapter is them going to the drop point where they pick up the supplies they need for the raid that they're going to do. Along the way, they start smelling this horrendous smell, and Sulo is like, hey, it's sewage, and Han and Qi'ra are like, what? And then they realize they've been out of the sewer so long that they finally can smell what sewage smells like, and understand the phrase of you can smell a white worm coming from a click away, or whatever it was. And that's just, there's something about knowing what your own sewage smells like, right? Knowing what your own waste smells like, being aware of this really terrible situation that you're in, that you've become numb to, that you've become nose blind to steal from Febreze ads. There's just something to that. I feel like there's a whole video just in how you become immune to your own situation, whether it's a situation that is not your fault, a situation you did not create, that is terrible, that you try to forget about, or if it's a situation that you did create and you give yourself excuses about, or, you know, it's a situation of good things, you know, sort of like a situation of privilege that you start to forget about other people's situations, which is not what our heroes are in. But there's just so much you can say about getting used to your own smell. I think there's just a whole other metaphor there that was just, there's just so many things in this book that are just so amazing, that are just mere sentences on the page that you could miss. And there's probably other things that I have missed because they were mere sentences and I was distracted by the other sentences that had just happened. Oh, there's so many moments in this book that are just, I don't even have words for how much I like them. But they get there, they find the materials. I like that they almost stun themselves because they're like, what's this? Is this a grenade? And it's just, it was kind of amusing. But they find out that they have to get into a highly guarded Imperial building to find this person, and then they go off to do that. So chapter 14, we're back in Han's point of view. He's more beat up than he lets on, which is very typical Han. He's appreciating and understanding Qi'ra more than he had previously. He's aware that she's nervous. He talks about how, like, you know, when she carries herself a certain way, it means she's nervous, and hoping that everyone else doesn't know her as well as he does. The way Han is connecting to her is really sweet. My relationship with Qi'ra, in terms of her relationship with Han, is interesting because I love Han and Leia, and I know Han and Leia is where Han ends up. And it was my worry about Qi'ra when I was going into Solo: A Star Wars Story before I'd seen the movie, and certainly before I'd read this book, of like, how much was I gonna like Qi'ra because she's not Leia. But the way the movie does it, and the way this book certainly does it, is it shows there is this really good relationship, even before it gets romantic, and a relationship that you can see how it becomes romantic, and that they could have worked. Like, if it wasn't for this whole Crimson Dawn swearing myself over to Darth Maul because Dryden Voss made me do horrible things for a large portion of my life thing, like, if you take that out of it, you know, maybe they could have worked. But sometimes life enslaves you to a crime lord and then you run away with Darth Maul. Like, you know, you can't always control those things, and that's okay. Well, it's probably not okay, but, you know, it happens. But this book does a really good job of not making, like, Qi'ra, she's not, like, in competition with Leia. At no point do I feel like this book or the film or anything else is putting Qi'ra in competition with Leia, or showing, look, this is where she's like Leia, but Leia's better, or this is where she's like Leia, but Qi'ra's better. Like, she's just another person. She's another person that happens to have a really good connection to Han. She's her own character that is cool enough to be able to be pals or more with the infamous Han Solo. You know, I really appreciate that she's just, you know, like so many people will have important emotional relationships in their life. You know, many people go through multiple loves in their life, and that doesn't always mean that one of those loves was a bad person and you're going through a series of bad people till you find a good one. And certainly that is some people's story, but that's not every person's story. I appreciate that Qi'ra is treated as I don't even want to call her an option, because that implies that her whole existence is to be for Han, which is not true. And in fact, it's the opposite in how she's treated. I appreciate that she is a valid stage in Han's life, and Han is a valid stage in her life, and that they are treated as equals in this book, and it is done with Qi'ra as her own character and not in the context of another one. And I don't know, I think everything there is well done as well. They get to the lobby, and this is, again, where we're seeing Han and Qi'ra work together as a team. Qi'ra is casing the place. She's trying to find a map. It's perfectly logical to assume there's a map somewhere. They can't find a map, so that's when Han goes up and fast talks his way into getting let on an elevator. And this is Han back in his element, and we get to see how they play off of each other. They eventually talk their way all the way to the cell, and that's when they find out that it's a Wookiee. The person they have to get out is a Wookiee. This is fun because we see Han try to use some Trilwook, we see a very broken Trilwook in Solo. Clearly he has improved on it from where he's at in the book, but he's got like a functional understanding. His level of understanding is kind of Kira's level of Huttese, and I like the little bit too where he's like, I think he said ship. He's like, that is the same grunt he just made for the other word. He's like, what? No, it's not. Like, just the, I don't know. The comedy was played off really well there, but it's also comedy that shows Han knowing a tough language. Like, again, everything here is doing more than one thing at once. They knock the Wookiee out and then use that as a scam to get the Wookiee on a medical bed so they can wheel him out, which was really impressive the way they were thinking through that. And it's going really well until they get into an elevator. And here's another really interesting scene because they're stuck in an elevator with a jerk. Like, that guy. Like, I don't know how many of you out there have ever had to deal with that guy, but they're stuck in an elevator with that guy. That, like, classic, hey, what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? Like, how did you get the job? And I like Han bristling at this. I do appreciate seeing Han's perspective of this, because he's like, as if you can't be pretty and in the Empire. You know, he's got that kind of protective boyfriend thing going already in a way, even though he's right. And then Qi'ra's just, like, not having it. And I love that Qi'ra never risks the mission, and she does so much to make sure, like, whatever her purpose is, she's doing it to its fullest, and she, you know, she's always worried about upsetting someone, but she is not taking crap from the guy in the elevator. Even though it actually proves to be a detriment to the plan, and she could have just gone, oh, you know, and smiled and, like, promised to meet him for a drink later and then never met him, and, like, they could have gotten out. And she could have done that, but she didn't. And that's when they have to use the other gas grenade. I like, too, that leads to her panicking, because she's like, I didn't even think about giving the Wookiee 2 doses, and she's like, I don't know about you, but, like, I'm the type of person where when I plan something and I feel so good about it, and then I mess up the one little thing, or I forget the one little thing, and then it's, like, as if I ruined absolutely everything. So I could relate to her in that moment, and Han kind of consoling her. And there's just a lot going on there also. And it was a fun series of events, and I do like seeing Qi'ra stick up for herself, even though it does kind of create a problem. But it is a problem that they then get themselves out of. So it was all worth it in the end. And I kind of skipped over this too, but I liked, there's one point where Han basically tells Qi'ra that she's really good at speaking Imperial, the way she was able to talk about the Wookiee that makes it sound official. Like, again, it's just Han and Qi'ra have gone from a point where they're constantly frustrating each other to a point where they're constantly appreciating each other, now to a point where they're vocalizing that appreciation of each other. And poor, good-hearted Sulo is just there. And I wonder if at this point Sulo is secretly afraid that they're going to just start making out in front of him one of these days, or just really hoping they start making out in front of him one of these days, because he just wants those 2 darn kids to make out already. I'm not sure where Sulo is as a shipper, but, you know, he's there. He's there. But that's what I have to say about chapters 13 and 14 this week. I thought these were perfect examples of how our unit here is working, and I'm very excited for what's coming ahead. For next week, we're going to read chapters 15 and 16. So 2 more chapters. Go ahead and do that. Leave me a comment telling me what you thought about the story so far. I really appreciate hearing from you guys. I haven't been as fast at responding to comments lately just because of various things, but I'm going to try to get better about that. But I do get to the comments, I promise. Go ahead and follow us on all of the socials, and I will talk to you guys next week.